All right, so now we need to start containerizing, or well, it's already containerized, but we need to push these containers to Terraform ECR. We're also, of course, going to need to create the Elastic Container Registry or repository, registry, whichever one. So we need to get that created, and we need to push the backend and front end Docker files to that registry. So I've got them both here. Again, at one point I had a prod version and staged builds and all of this type of stuff. Actually, I've still got a little bit of a staged build here for the front end, but the back end, I simplified it as much as possible so I don't have to fight too many fires at once. With LLMs, you really, really want to compartmentalize and create components when you can, break things up as much as you can, because again, as that context window gets larger, things get less accurate. It gets very difficult for it to find and follow all the missing pieces. Now, when you're working with production level Terraform, trying to break up things into not components, but modules, trying to follow variables throughout modules, things like that gets very difficult. Writing tests can be very useful for this. Also, making sure that you check everything over at least once or twice, making sure you run plans regularly, run Terraform Validate. All of these tools are incredibly important to make sure that you don't end up blowing things up. Now, luckily, we are still in a nice greenfield advantage right now. Basically, we can deploy whatever we want right now, but if you are trying to introduce LLMs into a production environment, you're going to need to be a lot more careful. It is not worth the damage you can cause. I mean, honestly, in a production environment, there are a lot of times where I just keep it in chat mode. I won't mess with write mode at all, really, because, unless you're making a huge refactor, which you should be doing in a staging environment anyway, or a dev environment, you should probably just be fixing very small things at a time. You should not be trying to rewrite your entire infrastructure at once. That's psychopathy. It's just crazy. Don't do it. I mean, LLMs, eventually you're going to be able just to let them loose. I mean, Claude Code, and you've got OpenAI Codex. Those work pretty well right now, and they do open PRs and all of that, but it's still early. And if you're doing anything serious, just be super careful about that type of stuff. Stick to your staging and stick to your staging and dev environments. Make sure that your applying and merging and all of that is set up well. Make sure that reviews are set up properly. You can definitely use another LLM to review your code, but I would still keep a human in the loop, to be honest. That being said, let's start to get to work. So what I'm going to do is head up to my customizations here. Cursor has the same type of thing with cursor rules. You've got, they all have kind of the same thing. Customizations, I have my rules here, and I kept it simple. Now you absolutely can come in here and just go crazy. I'm keeping it very simple. I've found, over my time doing a lot of prompt engineering, getting my grader right and all of that, that you can absolutely over prompt. And where those prompts show up in the context and everything else can really derail a lot of things. So I keep things simple as long as things are simple. Now, of course, as things get more complicated and you get multiple people involved and the stakes get higher, add to those rules, get things going. You need more velocity, whatever. Tell it to shut up sometimes. Tell it not to put emojis in your code, that type of stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, never Terraform apply, never Terraform destroy, and stay in scope. So this is one thing, especially Sonnet 3.7 had a lot of problems with this. So what it would do is you would say, hey, go and modify this one thing, go and fix this one thing, deploy this one feature. And it's like, oh, I just decided I'm going to write tests for your entire application. All of a sudden, your bank account's dry and it wrote a bunch of tests for things that you might have been about to change. or maybe it'll see a bunch of lint errors that you just don't care about right now, and it just goes nuts on that. Gets completely derailed, breaks functionality, etc. So I've found overall that this is kind of a decent rule to add in. But of course, there's a lot of really good rule lists out there that are a lot more intense than what I've got. I try to keep it simple, but this of course is completely up to you. Definitely experiment with that and see what you can do. All right, cool. Now, a couple other things that Windsurf has that I'm not going to get into again because not everybody has it, and I don't know how long Windsurf is going to be around. So workflows are really cool. I could actually add a workflow that might, run just Terraform format, Terraform validate, whatever. It's just kind of like the same thing as Git hooks, whatever. But this is really nice because there might be a very common thing you need to do, and you can run this very easy. So essentially a macro. And then of course, I've got my memories right here, which can be very helpful. You can also tell it to add things to your memories. This will help it keep things going. But of course, remember, if you do add something to a memory and that something is a feature that you removed, or maybe you changed standards, maybe you said, oh, we're going to Pascal case instead of camel case or whatever, you might want to make sure you delete that rule because that can become very difficult and cause a lot of weird things to happen with the LLM. All right, so anyway, back to Cascade here. Let's go ahead and start. So the first thing I want to do most likely is going to be to create the registry. We'll go ahead and we can take a look over at the tasks. So we need to deploy ECR. We need to build a container, push the container, and rebuild on tag change. Now, this could be different by the time you look. I might split this up into 2 different containers. I'm not sure yet. We'll see what happens. Again, this is a boot camp. Everything's going to be pretty fluid, so bear with me if this does not look the same. I might actually remove this title, etc. So anyway, back to the fun stuff. So we've got our very simple containers here. We need to get those to ECR. Now, this is actually a pretty simple operation. It's not too bad, but we're still going to treat it like it's, a little more difficult. Now, in the essence of time, I don't really feel like fighting for one anymore. I know I said earlier I was going to at 0.25x credit. It sounds awesome. I'm considering Gemini 2.5 Pro at 0.75x credit. That's pretty cool, but honestly, I might just go the old O3 here. O3 still is pretty good. Again, if things just stop working, we're going to go up to Sonnet. And in this case, we've got bring your own key, which just goes straight against the API. And then you've got what they call API pricing. What it's doing is it's basically hitting my credits and costs me about 20% more than the BYOK. So it doesn't really make much sense to use the API pricing. It is simpler in Windsurf because Windsurf they're not friends with Claude after their talks with OpenAI, which did fall through. They did not get access to their discounted pricing model. So, it's much more expensive. But overall, it's worth it. Time is money, right? So anyway, back to O3 here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to disable plan mode because not everybody has that. We're just going to do it. We're going to do it right. Let's go ahead and I am going to do a thing. A lot of people kind of make fun of this practice sometimes because this is basically vibe coding now. It's just a ton of markdown files. We're just going to create just ecr.md. Let's just do that. That's easy enough. So I'm going to say in and at ecr.md, just like that. Create a plan to use we're going to use the Kreuzwerker Docker provider and the AWS provider. We'll just let it know that. Of course, it knows that. To create an ECR, is it ECR repository, ECR registry? I don't remember because it sounds like ATM machine, I think there's a word for that, but anyway, I'm just going to say ECR registry. I guess I could say deploy ECR. Create an ECR registry, build the containers, or let's say build the front end and backend containers and push them to ECR. Yeah, I think that's really all we need to do. And then also we need to add a tag value to I would say we could say locals blocks. Locals block are variable. I want to say to a locals block. Who cares? To a locals block to force another build. Build if it's incremented. And then I'm also going to say, ensure you use Terraform best practices. Use the Terraform MCP server when needed. For each is always preferred over count. And I think that's most everything we need. Oh, and it needs to be modular. Although we'll probably put all of this into one module. It can be one module, but needs to be modular to allow future modules to be added. That makes sense, right? Yeah, I think that should work. Let's go ahead and give that a shot. So what it's going to do, it's in write mode, but hopefully it's not going to write too much code. It's going to basically give the plan and everything it's going to do to ecr.md. Let's go ahead and still say, though, focus on planning. Don't add all code to it. We don't want to code this thing twice to the plan file. So that works. Pretty big prompt, probably a little messy. It's late, whatever. Let's go ahead and see how this works. All right, we've got some thought process and it's analyzing. Let's see what happens. All right, editing. Bam, look at those tokens go. Yeah, revving up. All right, so it is planning a lot. Now, O3, I believe, has a context window of 200,000 tokens, so it's still pretty good to go. I don't think it got the million. I'm pretty sure only 4.1 has the million. All right, let's go ahead. I'm just going to accept it because I don't really care. It's not code. So now that I've accepted this edit, it's not green anymore. Yeah, usually what you can do is reject. So whenever you are actually coding, give it a good read through before you accept the code. It's a lot easier just to reject than have to create branches or create commits for every single thing you do. But then again, creating commits for any type of code is actually a very smart way to do this, because there are going to be times where it breaks so much crap, you just want to get stash and start again. So let's take a look. This document, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Don't care about that. We can even preview it. There we go. Hey, that's cool looking. Probably a little overdone. Okay, front and back end containers. Yep. Cool. So module ECR Docker images creates one ECR repository per service. I don't know if I want that. I don't know if we need that. So I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna ask if we want that. Do we want? Oh no. I think that's all right. Yeah, I think that's probably fine. Instantiates module once, passing a map service build context. Okay, networking ECS. Yep, only registry and image pipeline. Good. Let's make sure that it stays on task. All right, let's take a look here. Create the ECR repo. Yep. And lifecycle policy, that is fine. Build the image. Notice I didn't even mention lifecycle policy. That's great. Build the image with provider Docker, tag and push. Yep, that is right. For each everywhere. Awesome. var.service is a map of objects. That sounds great. Build tag and validation. Local.build suffix is concatenated into the image tag. Yeah, that sounds cool. Least privilege, IAM, future improvement. Yeah, whatever, that's future improvement. That's fine. All right, key locals and variables. Yep, services front end context. Yeah, that's fine. Docker file. Cool. All right, Terraform provider. Look at this. Oh man, that is ancient. Yeah, we're not going to do that. I am going to yell at it for that. I'm going to ask it to check first, and then we're going to go and verify that. All right, so we got registry auth. That, if I remember correctly, that's right. I am putting a lot of faith into our vibe coding to see what we come up with. All right, let's take a look. All right, root module usage example. Yeah, it looks good inside modules. All right, it did code more than I told it to, but that's okay. Okay, so we're not doing this yet. That's something we're going to come up with later. I'm not messing with where it is. You can host it in HCP, you can host it in S3, host it wherever you want. That is not what we're focusing on here. Okay, workspaces is, no, I don't want to use workspaces. All right, so now, here we go. It's starting to use some old stuff here. This is interesting. And I wonder if telling it to use the MCP server, I wonder if it did anything about that. That's interesting. All right. Use the Terraform MCP server to validate the provider versions. And we also don't want to use workspaces like that. And just keep state local for now. At least I'm doing that. You don't have to do that, of course. Adjust the plan based on this info. All right, let's see what it does. Right. Aha, yep, now it's hitting the MCP tool. So let's see what happens here. Okay, it's pulling a lot of fun stuff there. All right, looks like it is coming up with some things. Let's go ahead and see what it's changing here. Should be up here somewhere. Hadn't done it yet. Hadn't hit the providers yet. Let's close this and look. Okay, it did not change the version of Terraform. It did change the version of AWS. That is the latest. That's good. It did change the version of Docker. I'm going to go and take a look at that real quick. Let's go ahead and Kreutz worker Docker Terraform. Here we go. Probably saw my face light up on this thing. Yeah, 3.6, that is good. Awesome. So we're good there. And AWS should be 6 sounds right, but we might actually need a minor version. I'm not sure if we're going to want one or not. Let's see here. AWS Terraform provider. There we go. Cool. All right. Here we go. 6.3. All right. It's looking for, yeah, that's fine. So it'll pull 6.3 since we got this little guy here that will pull the latest minor version. So 6.3 is good to go. Okay. And again, you know what? Am I wrong? Maybe I was wrong about Terraform version. Hang on. What's the latest Terraform version? Current Terraform version. Okay. No, I was very right. Yeah. 1.12. No, 1.7. Okay. All right. Now go check the latest Terraform version. It's higher than 1.7. And sometimes I honestly don't tell it the answer right away. I like it to kind of remember where it looked. I don't know how well that works, but I kind of feel like if it gets in a habit of looking for things for itself, maybe it gets better. You know, teach a person to fish, whatever. I'm not totally positive, but sometimes it does seem to work better. Bam, there we go. Cool. All right, great. So those are all fixed there. And then down here, let's take a look. Use the local backend. Yep, add an ECR policy. Retain only recent images to save space. Yeah, who cares? That's fine. Yeah, none of that's happening right now. That's fine though. Yep, we don't have build args right now, so we're good to go. All right, cool. Yeah, so it's thinking a lot about the future, which is interesting. I think it's mad that we're not doing full-on best practices right now, but I am going to accept that. That sounds pretty good. I think we're getting pretty close now, so we can finally build this sucker up. All right, awesome. I think okay, cool. All right, let's go ahead and just see how well this works. I'm kind of interested to see. I don't think I have any AWS credentials set up right now, so I might do that offline in a bit. We will see. Actually, let's go ahead and just take a look. Get caller identity. Okay, cool. Credentials are ready to roll. So we've got all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and probably get this thing to start working on it. Now, some are better at these plans. I really don't like this plan. A lot of times they have they'll do a full-on checklist, and it's really great. So depending on how difficult this is, and this really isn't that difficult, but when you're working on a really difficult feature, going and saying like, all right, let's do phase 1. And sometimes you'll actually want to ask it, say, hey, we need you to set these up to where each phase ends in a testable state. So basically just say, all right, phase one is, set up the module and stuff like that. Go in and check, make sure that Terraform format, Terraform validate, Terraform init all work, add the providers, that type of stuff, and then continue after that. I'll be honest, this is a pretty small deployment. I'm thinking it's going to get pretty close. I have a feeling it's going to get real close. It's probably going to do a couple old weird things or some weird patterns, but overall, ECR might break, or Docker push rather, because I've encountered some issues in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see if it pulls it off, but let's take a look and see what happens. All right, plan is in place. Please do not interface with GitHub and respect the rules to never Terraform apply or destroy. Go ahead and implement the plan, and I'll test afterwards. All right, here we go. Let's see what happens. I'm going to record it, but if it gets really boring, I might end up just fast forwarding it a little bit. So if it just kind of skips ahead, that's why. Actually, you know what? I'm going to catch it, because if it tries to do all this stuff out here, I'm going to be so mad. Here we go. We'll call that, we'll just call it Terraform Infra. Usually I just call it Terraform, but since there is a .terraform directory already, that might get confusing. So use Terraform Infra. You gonna pick it up? No. Use the Terraform Infra directory. There we go. Cool. All right, we're off to the races. Let's see how O3 does, but I promise if it acts up and it becomes a major problem, we will be going with Sonnet 4. I just do not have time tonight to wait on O3 to figure things out if it starts to get stupid. So here we go. Fingers crossed. All right. Unfortunately, I had to step away to let cats out of the office, but let's take a look here. Okay, we've got 26 lines, 17 lines, 533. All right, we got some stuff modified. Versions.tf, that makes sense. Locals.tf, okay, it's following conventions properly. That's great. Scroll around and see, is there anything else interesting here? No remote state, no workspaces, no apply destroy. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and go. We're going to take a look at these diffs in a second. Cool. All right, we'll probably hard code that var because I don't really care. All right, so what it's doing here, it is opening all of the files that it modified. And as you can see, it's written a pretty good bit of stuff here. So let's take a look. We've got that var.tag suffix it mentioned. I'm actually not super familiar with that pattern. I use a different one, but I think it probably makes sense. ECR repository using this here, which I used to hate it, but it honestly is the way to do things. So let's take a look here. var services, cool. Let's go take a look at var services. Right. Okay, so where is it defining that? Let's take a look. Main.tf. Okay, interesting that that's out here. It's probably all right. Okay, Docker images, that's cool. Providers, interesting. Okay, repository URLs. All right, local, there we go. Yep, services, front end, context. Yep, that makes sense. Docker file, cool. All right, modules, main ECR repository, this for var.services. Hang on. No, I know what's going on here. Okay, so module, services, local.services. Yep, so services is now a var, obviously. So that is then here, services, cool. And var.services, each.key, image scanning configuration, scan on push, true. Yeah, might as well, it's fine. Tags managed by Terraform, cool. That's best practice for sure. Resource Docker image for each var.services, beautiful. Actually, sometimes I store everything in the same repository, but no, this is fine. We'll do it this way. Docker registry image, push, repository URLs, 4K. Yeah, very simple stuff there. Awesome. No, it looks great so far. I know that there could be something here missing, but I'm going to accept all these changes and accept all, and we're going to give this a shot. Sometimes it's better just to kick that plan off and find it there instead of trying to go line for line. Oh, right. Variables, region. Yeah, screw you. We're getting a default for sure. There we go. US East 1. So we get the maximum amount of downtime possible. Just kidding. But I mean, really, US East 1 is probably the most, or not probably, is definitely the busiest possible region you can choose. May not be the best one. I know 2 is actually missing some services. You always do have to reach back to US East 1 occasionally, but you know, it's great for testing because it does have all the cutting edge services on it. So let's do a Terraform init. Yeah, I knew it. I knew something was up with that. All right, let's go ahead and go see what silly stuff it did here. No, that's right. It's Docker and AWS. What was that error message? Silly vibe coding. Terraform init. Okay. Yeah, no, that's seriously just stupid. Let me get back here. Let me just comment that out and see if it plays nice. All right, cool. Versions.tf line 25. Now I could be piping all of this in, but like I said, it's late. I really don't feel like hanging around and fighting this forever. Okay. Oh no. We do not want local Docker daemon credentials. Okay, yeah, we don't want that. We want this thing to log in for us for sure. Okay, so we do know that's a problem. All right, default non-alias provider configuration Docker is already given, and main TF. I thought I got rid of that. Let's take a look. Docker. Wait. Oh, I see it right here. Okay, cool. There's a problem. All right, so I don't know why you're up here. I don't think. Why did they stick this up here like that? Anyway, I'm just going to pull this out of here right now and not worry about that. But yeah, as you can see, it looks as though what happened was it's like, oh, if you want to do it yourself, do it. And then it probably looked at the MCP server and said, oh, actually, you can do it this way. So it ended up duplicating the provider. These are the types of vibe coding things you get to play with. All right, Terraform init, come on. That's a little better. Let's see what happens. I'm still curious if it's going to off. Probably not, but let's take a look. All right. HashiCorp Docker. Yep, of course. All right, let's go back here. And yep, you have to specify that address in each module. You know what? I don't feel like going in and digging for this. I'm tired, so I am going to just grab this and pop it into my prompt here. Cool. Let's see if it fixes it without me having to do anything else. This is where laziness is born, everyone. I hope you enjoy our future of nobody doing anything. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so edited. It looks like it's figuring it out. All right, cool. Let's go. Okay, so add an explicit, require providers, Docker, block to the modules. All right, let's see what happens here. Terraform init, come on, let's go. This is way too wide, by the way. Cool, all right, so we have a successful initialization. That is a lot closer. Terraform plan, let's give that a shot. This is where the fun begins. Hey, we got a successful plan, that's cool. Color me a little bit surprised. I actually didn't expect it. But again, with stuff that involves authentication, stuff like that, the problems always come out in the apply, not the plan. Okay, repository, this back end will be created. This front end will be created. Docker image, go with our context. That's cool. Docker image with our context. Push and a push. Perfect. And I think, oh yeah, yep, nope, that's everything. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and see what happens. I'm gonna hit accept all just to get rid of that. I will say there's a fun little bug every now and then. If you don't accept some of the changes or you leave these files open while switching branches and things, it can get a little complicated. So sometimes, honestly, It's great just to close all the files and start fresh when you need to. All right, let's see what breaks. Terraform apply, auto approve. I know, we're doing it. There we go. All right, we are off to the races. Let's see what happens. All right, apply complete. That's kind of cool. So very interesting, to be perfectly honest. I did not expect that. Let's go ahead and run a Terraform state list just for the heck of it. That looks really cool right there. Everything is there. Now I could just hop into the console and see this real quick. Or we could do some fun things like give me the AWS command to see my ECR repositories. Just like that. All right. There we go. ECR describe repositories. US East 1 went ahead and did that for me because it knows that that's what I've been up against. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and drop it in. Let's take a look. All right. You got, yeah, that's one I was testing with a while back. There's another one I was testing with. All right. Sweet. There are our ECR repositories. So, man, that worked way better than I expected. You know, sure, we had a couple hiccups. And one thing you really need to remember, it's easy to get emotional. Sorry, that's a little bit of a strong word, but it's easy to get kind of emotional about the mistakes that these LLMs make. Remember, they don't have a concept of difficulty. They don't have a concept of like, you know, oh, that was a simple problem to fix. That's so stupid. I can't believe. Remember, like some of the easiest things out there are the least documented. So if they don't have that information to use, then they don't know. So sometimes LLMs will surprise you. They will solve the hardest problems because they're the most talked about on the internet and completely fall flat on their face for the easiest stupid things, you know, like this provider issue. I mean, honestly, I fall for the provider thing all the time. I constantly forget, you know, where to put the providers and things like that. And I've been doing this for half a decade, you know, but that's just kind of the thing. Mistakes will be made that will drive you up a wall. But if you are profiting off of, you know, saving this much time, I mean, this would have taken, you know, easily a couple hours longer, maybe tops, maybe an hour or two. It's not that much, but you know, when you're dealing with this many moving parts, it's easy to miss things. An LLM can do it, but I know for a fact I would do it. I mean, I'd probably screw this up once or twice. But anyway, let's go ahead and see if we nailed this. Oh, you know what? Where is the versioning? Did it get that right? I'm not sure if it got that right. Versions.tf, variables. Then there are locals. Yeah, you know, it mentioned, oh, maybe it's in here. It mentioned the prefix, but I'm not seeing it. I don't think it actually did it. So let's go ahead and make sure that that happens. I'm not seeing it anywhere. Did you implement tag versioning strategy? Let's see. I could just be tired. Wait, it says yes. Oops. I am sorry. It was in locals? Oh, right there. Build version 1. Yep, totally missed that. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and see how my little grader puts up with this. So push containers ECR. Let's go ahead and now if you have not installed the MTC CLI, you can grab it right there. It is good for any Linux or Mac OS machine. Init, you do not need this. I'm going to try to get rid of this, but right now you do not need this unless you just want a separate directory for it. This is for labs, smaller labs that include files, but this one does not. So I'm going to grab this submit right here and let's see what happens. Yep, we're in the Terraform infra directory. So let's see. I'm going to bring this up a little bit. All right, I am on the new learning platform, not the legacy. That's if you're on morethancertified.com. This is labs. So let's go ahead and there are our tasks right here. And what's going to happen is it's basically going to check for any TF files. TFR's files, again, do not hard code any of your credentials, please, 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 please don't do that. And echo everything out in a way that this LLM will understand. It's pretty rudimentary. Don't worry, it'll improve soon. All right, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. All right, so this is probably my bad. Build version is coming in as a prefix. It's not registering as a tag change. So let's see here, increment to force, Docker rebuild push, even if source unchanged. So yeah, that should go in as a tag version. Yep, tag suffix. All right, so interesting that the grader didn't get that. I will get that fixed real quick. All right, let's try that again. Sorry, I'm not going to show you completely how the sausage is made. This is my little secret, but I guarantee it's not that complicated. So let's go ahead and run this again and see. I just changed the way this is grading a little bit. If you do encounter something that you just cannot pass and you know it's right, always feel free to reach out to me and I can take a look. And bam, there we go. Everything is complete. So now we can head over here. I'm going to open this back up and hit refresh. We are all set. All right, and it is completed. All right, cool. So now we can move on and handle storing secrets securely and deploying EKS.